Hey, peace of the family, peace of the family. I was waiting to get an audience. It's wow, Saturday night, and I'm guessing that people got the air conditioners on and doing something else. But welcome, 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 welcome. This is Brother Reggie, and I am really doing this for the people. So the other night on the Community of Skeptics, Brother Ankh and his team uh, was did a show on outsiders to Egyptology and to science. Well, I'm not an outsider to either of those. I've spent more than 35 years studying ancient Egypt, as they call it, and certainly to science. I have a degree in science. I have an earned degree in science. So he probably wasn't directly talking to me, and I don't think that my brother Unc certainly was talking to me. But he made some points, and I got an opportunity to go over a lot of the things that he said, and I, I I finally figured it out, family. Brother Reggie has finally figured it out. That goes to the Egyptologist, and that goes to those that follow Egyptologists and think that anybody who goes against the Egyptologists or wrong, right? You can't go against Egyptology. Peace, I see my brother Morpheus in. Man, me and Morpheus, we keep going back on this Diddy decision. Uh, if nothing is going on, there's no decision tomorrow. Me and Morpheus, I'm going to call Morpheus and we're going to go at it, right? We're going to go at it. It's to the point now. It's to the point now that you know Morpheus is a real, as you know, bright guy, dude, teacher, and he knows about law, and I certainly know about law. Matter of fact, this whole day, I am this whole 3 days I have been answering a, motion to dismiss summary judgment by not answering the summary judgment, but by writing an opposition to the defendant's summary judgment on a case that I've been working on in New York courts. I've been working with the pro se plaintiff. Man, but tomorrow, boy, if Morpheus ain't doing nothing, uh, we are gonna go at it, right? Um, oh man, we just gonna go at it. So let me just start this show. So I prepared a video to get us through the show, and then depending on how many people's on, I'll go through parts of it. Now this is part one, but because part two is that I have figured out the Egyptologist who um, always go for the black land as if it's binary. It's either black land or nothing. Those who go and start talking and trying to use DNA and genetics wrongly. Um, and in this particular show, Ankh brought in one of our favorite experts, Dr. Shamarka Kite, to say some things, but I don't know if y'all understood what Dr. Shamarka Kite said. And I don't know if people actually understand his work. So without further ado, because who knows, I may not be here long. I'm just doing this. Christoph, thank you for signing on. Solomon TV, thank you for signing on. I'm doing this for the people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this video. And the video is has a lot of facts in it, right? And I understand that you may not understand everything that's being said. So after the video, I'm going to show a few things. So, hey, thank y'all for actually joining. So let's play the video. I'm going to play a little part of the video just to check to see if you can hear the sound.
Other night on the Community of Skeptics. there was a lively conversation on whether the modern Egyptian...
Did you hear that? Please press 1. If you heard that, any part of the video, please press 1 so I can begin.
The other night on the Community of Skeptics, there was a lively conversation on whether the modern Egyptians in ancient Egypt...
Did you hear that? Press 1. Press 1 if you heard the sound from the... Okay, thank you. All right, so great, my brother Christoph, man. Thank you so much, man. Okay, I don't want to be in the dark, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this and get me out of it, and let's go. So let's get it.
The other night on the Community of Skeptics, there was a lively conversation on whether the modern Egyptians in ancient Egypt closer related to the ancient Egyptians. Ankh and his team says yes, and uses Dr. Keita to say this is true. However, I heard Dr. Keita say something else. In addition, in examining his written work, he confirms what I have heard. Dr. Keita uses the Badarian and Nakada groups as a measure. He says that North Africans are related and the modern Egyptians are related because of these groups, and other groups within the region from earlier times. He also talked about modern Egyptians also have genetics from Greek and other groups from the Near East. There seems to be a major comprehension problem in our talks. In this conversation, I heard that we should just say North African. However, that is too general. I attempted to read some facts about the Badarian groups, but because of time and focus on the show, I was not able to. So the first thing I want to do is to play the discussion, then I will play my presentation, and then I will show additional data, so let's get it.
If you want to say this, the Egyptians today are not the same as the Badarians, I'm willing to stand up and say that. The modern Egyptian population, I believe, now let's call it a belief, has absorbed a lot of people over a long period of time. It doesn't take a whole lot of migration if you do it, say, over 25 generations to fundamentally change the genetics of the population.
Let's put Dr. S.O.I. Keita's statements in context. But he was clear as a bell, and let's add from the Wikipedia article on the Ibero-Mauritians for good measure. Loostrecht states, present-day North Africans share a majority of their ancestry with present-day Near Easterners, but not with sub-Saharan Africans, although the predominant Y-DNA of the Maghreb is EM81. See haplogroup EZ827. With these statements, I think that we can say that the modern North Africans may be related to the ancient Egyptians, but certainly not directly related as opposed to indigenous populations of Africa. Let's see the conversations. Maybe Ankh and his team can find a better source or find one of his experts to say something different than Dr. Keita.
I mean, it has been said that the people that are there are closer to the ancient Egyptian population. It has been said that, yes. But opposed to who? Opposed to the Nubian people? Opposed to the people in the Western Desert? No, right? Opposed to the Noor, the Dinka, those groups? No. Those populations, even the Ethiopian groups, those populations are closer to the ancient Egyptians than the modern Egyptians that are there now. And I think that Dr. Shamaka Keita said that. If you go back and listen to what he actually...
I didn't say that.
What he actually played, what he said.
Address something that I think someone raised in the chat box. They raised a question about modern Egyptians viewing themselves. It depends on which modern Egyptians you talk to, what they think, and how much they look like the most ancient Egyptians. In a way, it really doesn't matter because they still are carrying some of that DNA to some degree from those earliest days, although some of them very obviously and know that they are of Turkish ancestry and know that they've been assimilated into the population. And so, this is really a matter of, it's very difficult as one Egyptian woman who I'm going to be working with, who is working on this whole issue of Egyptians and Africanity and Arabicity and reconciling conflicts between African Americans. So there are people, even Egyptians, who are working on this stuff. The whole notion of indigenous in Egypt gets very difficult for all the obvious reasons, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It gets very, very difficult, except for the obvious recent immigrants or the people who know, well, we're Turks.
So it seems people dove in on the word Turks. And it was clear what he said. There are Egyptians, right? They recognize themselves as Turks and claim the identity of being an Egyptian, but they realize where they come from. Not to be confused with the overall population. All right? I see how y'all tried to blend that in there. Y'all tried to play that game. Let's finish in what he's saying.
Was it ever a history or historical evidence to show that the population in Egypt was
I'm sorry. You're not hearing it. I tried to. You're not hearing the video. Okay, here it goes. All right, so here it goes. I'm gonna go back. I just took off my mic. Okay, so here we go. So let's start here. Okay. Sorry. Make sure the volume is turned up. Yeah, here we go. And play. Sorry. Listen to what he actually.
I didn't say that.
What he actually play. What he said.
Address something that I think someone raised in the chat box. They raised a question about modern Egyptians viewing themselves. It depends on which modern Egyptians you talk to, what they think, and how much they look like the most ancient Egyptians. In a way, it really doesn't matter because they still are carrying some of that DNA to some degree from those earliest days. Although some of them very obviously are and know that they are of Turkish ancestry and know that they've been assimilated into the population. And so, this is really a matter of, it's very difficult as one Egyptian woman who I'm going to be working with, who is working on this whole issue of Egyptians and Africanity and Arabicity and reconciling conflicts between African Americans. So there are people, even Egyptians, who are working on this stuff. the whole notion of indigenous in Egypt gets very difficult for all the obvious reasons, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It gets very, very difficult, except for the obvious recent immigrants or the people who know, well, we're Turks.
So it seems people dove in on the word Turks, but and it was clear what he said. There are Egyptians, right? They recognize themselves as Turks and claim the identity of being an Egyptian, but they realize where they come from. Not to be confused with the overall population. All right? Y'all try, I see how y'all tried to blend that in there. Y'all tried to play that game. Let's finish in what he's saying.
To be able, was it ever a history or historical evidence to show that the population in Egypt was displaced? And so you'll hear people say, that's another of those claims, that those Egyptians, that those modern Egyptians are a replacement population. And that's one of those
That's something you say, right, Reggie?
I had clicked away for a second. So what am I saying?
You say that the population is that right now is a replacement population.
Yes.
Okay, so here go the answer to this.
centric ideas that hold, well, a lot of people say that and so the people say that those Afrocentric ideas, population, and that's what are a replacement population, and that's those Egyptians, that those modern Egyptians are a replacement population, and that's one of those Afrocentric ideas that hold, well, a lot of people say that and so this is where the rubber meets the road. What is the,
okay? Let me answer that for you.
Okay, yeah,
very scientific, very
scientific. Let's get it
very easily.
Okay.
The modern Egyptian population, I believe, now let's call it a belief, has absorbed a lot of people over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And there are models that you can actually run. Actually, someone developed at my alma mater before I got there, where you can actually do really basic gene simulations, and you can show how if you have 5% migration, which means 5% of people coming from the outside into a given space and assimilating, okay, and having children there. It doesn't take, and in fact, I published based on something that somebody else said, it doesn't take a whole lot of migration if you do it, say, over 25 generations to fundamentally change the genetics of the population.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. Okay. But now, does the population change its social cultural identity? No, not if people have been totally absorbed. We're not talking about people moving in and keeping to themselves. We're talking about people who come in and get assimilated. And let's think about a situation where in the Islamic period where polygamy gets to be very common, right?
Correct.
So if you have polygamy and you have foreign male lineage coming in, and he has 4 local wives, he's going to produce, all of the sons are going to be carrying that foreign lineage. So you can increase it, not due to natural selection, not due to some evolutionary process, but just simply due to out reproducing everybody else. Okay. So when you make a claim that the Egyptians there today, if you want to say this, that the Egyptians today are not the same as the Badarians, I'm willing to stand up and say that. Okay.
Me too.
That's an easy statement to make. But it doesn't mean that the Egyptians of today, when I say not the same, doesn't mean that they're not related to the Badarians.
They're related.
Any more than an Afro-American who can pass a white doesn't mean that he's not related to some Africans. It just means he has less African ancestry. So it really depends on how you want to pin your perspective.
How you want to fight that fight?
Well, it's not a fight. It's not a fight. It's not a fight. I mean, in my
it's a fight.
Well, okay, all right.
Yeah.
I don't believe
emphatically. I'll tell you what they say emphatically. Emphatically, that the population in the Nile Valley now is not, wouldn't be part of those ancient Egyptians, or not those people at all. That those Egyptians that went to Kenya, South Africa, and that's what and they take their totals with you. I've heard all of it.
Okay. Now let me ask a question about this.
Ask that question. Go
You
ahead.
have to ask the question. If anybody shares that in that way, you have to ask them, well, why aren't they speaking Egyptian?
Where they at when they went to?
Oh, stop.
No, go ahead. It's not enough. Okay, Reggie, what is this?
This is on Badarians. In 2005.
No, what's the name of the paper, bro? Don't just start reading.
Wikipedia on Badarian.
Area, it's the area of Badaria.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead, right?
In 2005, Shamoka Keita examined Badarian crania from pre-dynastic Upper Egypt in comparison.
Right. Okay. Egypt.
You didn't let me finish. That's how you do, Unc?
No, we read.
You look at one word. Is that how you do, bro?
But that's what I'm trying to tell you.
You look at one word. You stop me at one word.
Go ahead, Reggie.
You don't even let me finish.
Go ahead, Reggie.
In 2005, Dr. Shamoka Keita examined Badarian crania from pre-dynastic Upper Egypt in comparison to European Norway and Hungary and various tropical African crania, Southern Africa, Mali, Kenya. He found that the pre-dynastic Badarian series clustered much closer with the tropical African series. That's not the North Africans you're talking about, although no West African or other North African samples were included in the original study as a comparative series was selected based on groups.
You threw some words in there, Reggie?
What North Africa you talking about, Reggie? Even modern day North Africa.
Wait, man, you threw words in the source. It didn't say nothing about North Africans. Why would you do that?
Listen, I didn't have to say that. He found that the pre-dynastic Badarian series clustered much closer with the tropical African series.
Okay, go ahead.
Although no West Asian or other North African samples were included in the original studies, comparative series was selected based on Brass's 1993 comments on the affinities of Upper Egyptian, Nubian, Epipaleolithic series. Keita noted that the additional analysis using material from Sudan, late dynastic, northern Egypt, Gaza, Somalia, Asia, and the Pacific Islands shows that the Badarian series to be more similar to a series from the northeast quadrant of Africa and then to other Africans.
There you go.
Moreover, Keita criticized the methodology of tracing study for examining the Maghreb, Sudan, and the Horn of Africa from the designated sub-Saharan group samples, which he argued were nearly categorized incorrectly as monolithic. Keita further commented on the findings of Boyce. So I will stop there, and I just want in this forum. I made my point.
So now all of a sudden, Egypt ain't Egypt, yo?
No, does it say that?
The man said that.
Does it say that here?
Yeah.
He says that the Badarian groups were more closer to Tropicana Africa, tropical Africa. That's what he said, right? And then he goes on, he starts.
So you don't include Upper Egypt with Egypt no more?
No, I absolutely do.
So then when the man say that the modern Egyptians, they live in the upper and lower.
No, he didn't say lower. He didn't say lower.
He just said Egypt, bro.
He said Upper Egypt.
No,
right?
I'm talking about.
Then it goes in 2008.
I know you
found that the early.
Reggie, you doing this, man? I know you.
I'm reading. What am I wrong? What am I doing?
Because the video, the man said that the modern Egyptians, and I'm telling you that modern Egyptians live in Upper and Lower Egypt, not unless I'm just crazy, right? He simply said that the modern Egyptians, right, are related to the Badarians. I don't know why why that's not you, right? Why you gotta go read the source and reinforce what the man said, because he wrote that. I don't understand how you separating Upper Egypt from Lower Egypt. Like, why? It's Egypt, bro. I don't know why y'all do that, bro.
Because
it makes no sense. He didn't say the modern Egyptians in northern Egypt or the modern Egyptians in lower. He ain't say none of that. He just said the Egyptians. Meaning all of that is inclusive, bro. He would know that because he wrote the source you're talking about. We don't got
and I read,
and that's fine, Reggie.
This is your show.
That's a great Reggie.
What he says.
Reconciling genetic and anthropological narratives. The Badarian, Nakada, and modern North African populations. Abstract. There is ongoing debate regarding the origins and affinities of ancient Egyptian populations, particularly the Badarian and Nakada cultures, and their relationship to modern North Africans. While some genetic narratives emphasize Near Eastern connections, a growing body of anthropological, archaeological, and genetic evidence, including the work of Dr. Soy Keita, supports continuity with Northeast African populations. This paper synthesizes recent and authoritative studies demonstrating that Badarian and Nakada populations were fundamentally Northeast African, with strong biological and cultural ties to Nubian and Horn of Africa groups. Modern North Africans and Egyptians retain aspects of this ancestry, especially in the south, but exhibit additional admixture from Near Eastern, European, and Sub-Saharan sources over the past 2 millennia. The findings challenge the notion of a primarily Near Eastern origin for early Egyptians and highlight the complex, layered history of population interactions in the region. Introduction. The origins and population history of ancient Egypt have long been subjects of scholarly debate, with particular attention paid to the Badarian and Nakada periods as formative phases of Egyptian civilization. Some genetic studies have emphasized connections between ancient Egyptians and populations of the Near East, suggesting significant external influence or migration. However, a substantial body of anthropological, archaeological, and more recent genetic evidence points to strong continuity with Northeast African populations, especially those of Nubia and the Horn of Africa. Badarian culture, ND, Nakada culture, ND, population history of Egypt, ND. Dr. Soy Keita, a leading bioanthropologist, has argued that both ancient and modern Egyptians are best understood as part of a diverse indigenous Northeast African continuum with deep local roots and a history of complex admixture. Keita, 2005. This paper synthesizes current evidence from craniometric, dental, archaeological, and genomic studies to clarify the relationship between the Badarian and Nakada cultures and both their ancient and modern North African descendants, integrating Dr. Keita's perspectives and findings. Badarian and Nakada biological affinities. Cranial and dental analyses consistently demonstrate that Badarian and Nakada populations cluster most closely with Nubian, A group, Kerma, and other Northeast African groups rather than with Levantine or European populations. Gotti, 2009, 2020, Badarian culture, ND, Nakada culture, ND. Gotti, 2009, 2020, found that Badarian and Nakada crania are most similar to Nubian A group samples, and dental trait analyses further support a Northeast African connection. Population history of Egypt, ND. Physical traits of Badarians include a mix of North African and Sub-Saharan, tropical African characteristics, with limb proportions and cranial features consistent with adaptation to hot climates, traits that persist in later Egyptians, Badarian culture, ND, world history, Edu, ND. Dr. Keita, 2005, emphasizes that ancient Egyptians exhibited a range of craniofacial and skeletal features reflecting both North African and Sub-Saharan influences, and that this diversity predates the dynastic era. Genetic and archaeological context. Archaeological and anthropological evidence indicates that the Badarian and Nakada cultures developed from long-term local populations in Upper Egypt and the surrounding Northeast African region, not from Near Eastern migrants. World History Edu, ND, Nakada culture, ND, Population History of Egypt, ND. Errit, 2023, and Keita, 2005, both emphasize that the founding populations of ancient Egypt show no demographic indebtedness to the Levant, with closest parallels to Nubia and the Horn of Africa. While there was ongoing gene flow between Upper Egypt and Nubia, and broader connections with the Sahara and the Horn, the evidence does not support wholesale replacement by Near Eastern groups. The Nile served as a corridor for north-south migrations, and the archaeological record demonstrates both cultural and biological continuity across the region. Do cultural and biological variation, ND. Modern North Africans and Egyptians, continuity and complexity. Modern Egyptians and North Africans retain some ancestry and physical characteristics from these ancient populations, particularly in Upper Egypt and among Berber groups. Population History of Egypt, ND. Dr. Keita, 2005, in both his published research and recent public statements, affirms a biological relationship between the Badarians and modern Egyptians, especially those from Upper Egypt. He notes that the diversity in craniofacial features and skin color seen in modern Egyptians likely mirrors that of ancient populations, and that the mixed ancestry of Egyptians predates the dynastic period. Craniometric and dental studies confirm that Badarian biological traits persist most strongly in Upper Egyptians and Berber populations, reflecting partial descent from Badarian-related populations. Gotti, 2009-2020, Keita, 2005. However, later admixture with Near Eastern, European, and Sub-Saharan populations, especially after the Arab conquest and trans-Saharan slave trade, has added complexity to the modern gene pool. Population History of Egypt, ND. Ancient DNA studies show that while ancient Egyptians shared more ancestry with Near Easterners than present-day Egyptians, modern Egyptians have received additional sub-Saharan admixture, but genetic continuity between ancient and modern Egyptians cannot be ruled out. Schuenemann et al., 2017. Keita, 2005, has also highlighted that the majority of modern Egyptian Y DNA lineages are of African origin, notably E1B1B, and that mitochondrial DNA of African origin remains present at significant frequencies. Modern Egyptians display a north-south climb. Lower Egyptians have higher Near Eastern and European admixture and weaker Badarian ties, while Upper Egyptians are closer to Badarians, with stronger sub-Saharan African affinities and indigenous traits. Thus, while Badarians form one ancestral layer of modern Egyptians, their legacy is most evident in southern groups and diluted elsewhere by later demographic shifts. Reconciling the contradiction. The latest anthropological and archaeological evidence, along with limited ancient DNA from relevant periods, overwhelmingly supports the view that Badarian and Naqada Egyptians were fundamentally Northeast African, with their closest ties to Nubians and other local populations, not to the Near East. Ancient DNA from later periods, e.g. the Abu Sir El Malek mummies, reflects increased Near Eastern and some European admixture, but these samples are geographically and temporally distant from the Badarian and Naqada heartland. Modern Egyptians and North Africans are genetically diverse due to subsequent migrations and admixture, but the core ancestry of Upper Egyptians and Berbers remains rooted in the indigenous Northeast African populations of the Badarian and Naqada eras. Population History of Egypt, ND&D. Keita, 2005, has repeatedly cautioned against simplistic racial classifications, emphasizing the indigenous development of Egyptian civilization and the persistence of African biological and cultural traits. Conclusion. Current evidence demonstrates that the Badarian and Naqada cultures were indigenous to Northeast Africa, with primary biological and cultural ties to Nubia and the Horn of Africa. Modern North Africans and Egyptians retain elements of this ancestry, especially in the South, but have experienced significant admixture over the last 2 millennia. Dr. S.O.Y. Keita's perspective is supported by both craniometric and genetic data, showing that the Badarian legacy is most evident in Upper Egyptians, while the narrative of a primarily Near Eastern origin for ancient Egyptians is not supported for the formative periods of Egyptian civilization. The diversity of ancient and modern Egyptians reflects a long history of local development and regional interaction, not population replacement.
Okay, so Pan-African Designs, thanks for coming in. So what I did was I just beat up Ankh and them, right? I'm gonna play this back, right? I'm gonna say like Smash says, golly, right? Listen to what Dr. Shamaka Keita says, and listen to what Ankh's what Ankh his how he does this interview. Listen to it, right?
I say this: the Egyptians today are not the same as the Badarians. I'm willing to stand up and say that.
So Dr. Shamaka Keita says the base of Egypt is the Badarians, ancient Egypt. And he's saying that if someone says that the modern Egyptians are different, right? Or he says that the modern Egyptians are different than that base, he would stand up and say it. So let me just play that again.
In my presentation, and then I will show additional data.
Has absorbed a lot of people.
No.
It's the Badarians.
Listen to what he
I'm willing to
says.
stand up.
The discussion. Then I will play my presentation, and then I will show additional data. So let's get it.
If you want to say this, the Egyptians today are not the same as the Badarians. I'm willing to stand up and say that.
So what he did was he looked at the base. Thank you, Christoph. So what he said, if someone was to say that the modern Egyptians are not the same as the Badarians, right? He would stand up on that, right? Because he's using the southern populations. Well, the Badarian is really the heart of around Egypt, right? The heart, that culture, and then it's the Nakata culture, right? And then of course there's the Aswan population, and then there's the what you call the Nubian population, which obviously is in Aswan and Elephantine. But he's saying that modern Egyptians may be related through North African ancestry, those groups, to the Badarians, but as opposed to what? As opposed to the Dinka? No. As opposed to the Noor? No. As opposed to the Magi in the eastern and western desert? No. As opposed to the Tamil groups? No. Right? No. Those people are more related to the ancient Egyptians and even the groups in the Horn of Africa. But let's continue.
The modern Egyptian population, I believe, now let's call it a belief, has absorbed a lot of people over a long period of time. It doesn't take a whole lot of migration if you do it, say, over 25 generations to fundamentally change the genetics of the population.
Let's put Dr. S.O.Y. Keita's.
He says over 25 generations, which has occurred, you can change the genetic population. So the modern Egyptians that he is talking about, with the absorption of the Greeks, Romans, the absorption of the Arabs over this time period, right? The genetic population has changed. So let's go.
Statements in context. But he was clear as a bell, and let's add from the Wikipedia article on the Ibero-Maurusians for good measure.
So now I had to go back and I had to deal with Ngozi, right? Because he always talks about the Ibero-Maurusian groups of people, right? So those type of groups, and then I'm gonna pull up the screen and talk about them more. But let's see what Lostrecht states.
Lostrecht states, present-day North Africans share a majority of their ancestry with present-day Near Easterners, but not with sub-Saharan Africans. Although the...
Okay, so this is very important. Okay, so what's above Egypt? What's above Egypt? The water, right? Now there are populations that were in the delta, right? Those populations early that were settled there, they were more connected to the Levantine groups of people. The other problem with this is, what the hell is sub-Saharan? Right? Now, I'm going to do another part 2 on this, and I'm going to address the BS on sub-Saharans. Is Nubia sub-Saharan? Wait, hold up. Is Nubia sub-Saharan? I can see you saying parts of the Sudan is sub-Saharan, right? Is Ethiopia sub-Saharan? Right? So when I open up the line, we're going to just talk about this briefly. Okay, or all of that Northeast Africa? Yes, all of that is North Africa, right? All of it is North Africa. But is the Nubian population sub-Saharan? Right? Where do you draw this artificial, got that on intellectual academic barrier? So the Badarian groups, according to what Dr. Shamak Akita says, or have more affiliations with Nubia and the Horn of Africa. Immortal Dragon Review, no, it's in the Sahara, right? When okay, sub-Saharan is human. I don't understand that. Okay, Pan-African Design says sub-Saharan is human. Yes, they are, right? Sub-Saharan is the how can I say, is a pathway that was created by climate, right? As the climate changed. And then Mortal Dragon Review says, no, it's in the Sahara. Okay. Well, the Sahara is in Egypt now, right? When you go to Egypt, you step right on the Saharan desert, right? Siwa and all of that is the Saharan desert, right? But the issue is, what did the Saharan desert or the Saharan groups, right? If you want to say the Western Saharan groups of those groups of Nabta Playa, yes, they came into the region, right? And certainly they brought in, they fomented or added into the cattle culture, right? Because we can clearly see that with the cow stone. But the issue is the other stuff, the kingship and all that other stuff, that comes from the south, right? And so where Norma did a campaign from south to north. Sub means below. Immortal Dragon Review, you're not wrong, but they're using this racially, as if people didn't cross, as if the desert was the same 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, right, to now, right? We're talking about ancient Egyptian populations, Badarian populations, which is in Egypt, right? There we're not talking about sub-Saharan. Okay, for example, is Ethiopia sub-Saharan Africa? Answer me that. Is Ethiopia sub-Saharan Africa? Okay, here's Ethiopia on the slide, right? But they like to term Ethiopia as Northeast Africa. So Ethiopia is way below the line of Nubia and the Sudan, right? It's way below the line. So what they do is they create these artificial terms. So when you start talking about ancient Egypt and you say sub-Saharan, well, where's sub-Saharan? So you must be talking about sub-Saharan here. You're really not talking about Ethiopia, right? That's Northeast Africa. All of this is Northeast Africa. So they like to play the words. So when they want to look at the Nubian populations, they want to call them sub-Saharan, but they want to call Ethiopian Northeast Africa. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. Pan-African Design says they have human DNA in the north too. Yes. Right? There's only humans. Yes. But the North African population, according to Lostrex, states present-day North Africans share majority of their ancestry with present-day Near Easterners. And so this group all the way up here, right? This was a belt where you have the Libyan populations, let's just call them at that time, the Libyan populations. And yes, they share a very ancient connection to the peoples from the Levant. But when you start talking about ancient Egypt, the Badarians or the measure, right? Now, these North Africans, do they share some related with the groups of the Badarians? Yes, by some connection of admixture, but they share more Levantine, Asian DNA than they do with the southern populations. Right. Pan-African designs, you're right. Fake naming conventions. Okay, so that's that. And what else is going on here? So, um, so uh, my. Okay, so this conversation with Dr. Shamaka Keita, let me just review it again, and let's listen to what he has to say.
Someone raised in the chat box. They raised a question about modern Egyptians viewing themselves. It depends on which modern Egyptians you talk.
Okay, so he's saying now, be specific
to what they think and how much they look like the most ancient Egyptians. In a way, it really doesn't matter because they still are carrying some of that DNA to some degree.
Some DNA to some degree. Doesn't matter what they look like, but some DNA. But as opposed to what other groups? The Nur, the Dinka, right? Eastern Desert, Western Desert, Sudanic populations, Nubian populations. They share less.
From those earliest days, although some of them very obviously are and know that they are of Turkish ancestry and know that they've been assimilated into the population. And so, this is really a matter of, it's very difficult. As one Egyptian woman who I'm going to be working with, who is.
So in the phases of the of Arab expansion into Egypt, the first groups of people were the soldiers, of course, from the Prophet Muhammad time, right? Those groups, the Umayyad groups after the Prophet Muhammad. And then later, there was expansion by the Ottomans who came in and took it from those caliphates, right? And they brought in the bulk of the Arab groups, almost replacing to a certain degree or minimizing the populations of the Berber groups that were converted during the Umayyad Abbasid periods in Egypt. And so the Ottomans come in, right? And then they become the controlling groups of people and minimize everybody else. In Immortal Dragon Review, we are all learners. The problem is that when other groups of people in our community say that that we can't comprehend this information, and it has to be spun their way. So what I just do is I'm just showing the data. So what else is Dr. Keita saying? So Dr. Keita cuts it by saying Turkish groups.
Working on this whole issue of Egyptians and Africanity and Arabicity and reconciling conflicts between African Americans. So there are people, even Egyptians, who are working on this stuff. The whole notion of indigenous in Egypt gets very difficult for all the obvious reasons, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It gets very, very difficult, except for the obvious recent immigrants or the people who know, well, we're Turks.
So it seems people dove in on the word Turks. And it was clear what he said. There are Egyptians, right? They recognize themselves as Turks and claim the identity of being an Egyptian, but they realize where they come from.
That's not true. No, they are now Egyptians. They don't. They many of them have spent their whole lives, several generations in Egypt, and they call themselves Egyptians, and they don't call themselves Turks anymore. They don't refer to themselves as Turks, but now they are Egyptians, and those Egyptians are saying that they are the ancient Egyptians.
Not to be confused with the overall
Modern Egyptians are the replacement population. And
Now, this thing of replacement populations is problematic. Dr. Keita is basically saying he's really talking about this population of Coptics and other, how can I say, uh, Berber groups, right? They're absorbing lots of DNA from lots of people. However, the population of those people that came later, the Ottomans and those groups of people, yes, they're absorbing DNA from the earlier groups, but in a different type of way, meaning that they are the masters. They get to uh, admix with the females, with beautiful females in the area. And so the population changes like that, but there's an increased signature of people from um, Eurasia, right? Remember, and before that, there was the Greeks and the Romans in the area, and then it became the uh, Berber groups that were converted, and then it became the Ottoman groups that ran Egypt for a while. So the fact of the matter is, yes, they are absorbing, the children are being born, but absorbing ancient Egyptian populations only when they admix with local females.
and that's one of those
I don't know what's happening.
That's something you say, right, Reggie?
um I had clicked away for a second. So what am I saying?
You say that the population is that right now is a replacement population.
Yes.
So here you go. Here go the answer to this.
Centric ideas that whole, well, a lot of people say and so will say that those are Afrocentric ideas, population, and that's what are the replacement population, and that's those Egyptians, those modern Egyptians are the replacement population, and that's one of those Afrocentric ideas that whole, well.
So now, okay, now Ankh now uses this word Afrocentric ideas. Okay. There are a lot of ideas in this, right? I just think it's a fact that the Ottoman groups controlled Egypt. And it's a fact that uh, Cairo was one of the epicenters of enslavement, right? It's a fact, right? And so it's a fact that the population, existing populations, particularly those that were not Arab or Islamic, that they were put in a genetic cesspool where many of the men were dark skinned African people. It was a corridor to go into the Ottoman regions and then later exported out into the Indian Ocean, right? Into places where the Ottomans controlled. So I differ a little bit with Dr. Keita. I understand what he's saying, but I would bring in the whole Islamic slave trade in Cairo. I would bring in all the corridors from North Africa where slaves were enslaved people, African people were transported and then transported from North Africa, Northwest Africa to Northeast Africa, during the Ottoman period. I would take measure with that, but let's continue.
A lot of people say and so this is where the rubber meets the road. What is the,
Okay, let me answer that for you.
okay, yeah,
Very scientific, very
scientific. Let's get it.
very easily.
Okay.
The modern Egyptian population, I believe, now let's call it a belief, has absorbed a lot of people over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And there are models that you can actually run. Actually, someone developed at my alma mater before I got there, where you can actually do really basic gene simulations, and you can show how if you have 5% migration, which means 5% of people coming from the outside into a given space and assimilating, okay, and having children there. It doesn't take, and in fact, I published based on something that somebody else said, it doesn't take a whole lot of migration if you do it, say, over 25 generations to fundamentally change the genetics of the population.
Boom. And that's what happened. Boom. So the modern Egyptians, or the groups of people who kept coming from other places, right? And mixing largely with themselves and somewhat with the southern populations, there's been a population change, right? Boom.
It doesn't. But now, does the population change its social-cultural identity? No.
Well, I take kind of issue with Dr. Shamaka Kita that the fact of the matter is it did. The language of the ancient Egyptians was ended. The speech was ended. The language was ended by the Romans. The speech was ended, and they became Arabized, and they spoke Arabia. You could talk to Brother Morpheus about that, right? So there's no speaking of the Medu Neter, as we call it, right? So socially and culturally, it became Arabized.
Not if people have been totally absorbed. We're not talking about people moving in and keeping to themselves. We're talking about people who come in and get assimilated.
Well, the Ottoman groups of people and the other groups of people, they assimilated by force. Either you take the Shahada and you convert, or you pay the taxes, or you just sold into slavery, or you die.
And let's think about a situation where in the Islamic period where polygamy gets to be very common, right?
Okay, so now he's talking about in the Islamic period, right, where polygamy is common. Now listen to what he says.
Right. So if you have polygamy and you have foreign male lineage coming in, and he has 4 local wives, he's going to produce, all of the sons are going to be carrying that foreign lineage. So you can increase it, not due to natural selection, not due to some evolutionary process, but just simply due to out reproducing everybody else.
Crystal clear as a bell if you could hear it. That is in fact what happened. The invading populations that had huge harems. That was part of their luxury, right? And they produced children, particularly the males, that carried their father's DNA, right? So, and that's a fact, Jack.
Okay, so when you make a claim that the Egyptians there today, if you want to say this, that the Egyptians today are not the same as the Badarians, I'm willing to stand up and say that.
Boom. Now, how do you spin that BS? How do you spin it other than what he's saying? He's saying the most ancient populations is the Badarian groups, and I would add the Nakata groups, right? Okay, Yarok says, important fact, that they were turning people into eunuchs, right? So that the male population of the indigenous groups of people, they were castrated and turned into eunuchs. Now, so when you add that on, thank you so much, Eric. Right? So now the population coming in from the Ottomans and previously from the other groups is controlling the genetic signature within the population. And so to come up and say the modern Egyptians or the ancient Egyptians, right, is crazy. They are related in DNA, but crazy other. But anything else other that you say otherwise is crazy. Now, why do we understand that, and why does the groups that we argue with, why don't they, especially when they bring in Dr. Shamaka Kita, who's telling you directly, telling us all.
Okay,
Me too.
point, that's an easy statement to make, but it doesn't mean that the Egyptians of today, when I say not the same, doesn't mean that they're not related to the Ptherians.
Okay, but he explained the relationship. The relationship is that they are certainly related because these Ottoman groups and other groups of people are controlling the genetics, and so then you have admixture of these groups, foreign groups, into Egypt with women. And so even the sons have some relationship to the indigenous population that was already there, but it's minuscule and it doesn't have anything that it's just related. So Dr. Shamakakita talked about the relationships, right? How they are related. But let's see if these things are understood.
They're related.
Any more than an Afro-American who can pass for white doesn't mean that he's not related to some Africans. It just means he has less African ancestry.
He gave a perfect example, right, of how groups of people are impacted by the dominant and controlling male populations, right? And so African American who could pass for white has less genetic signatures uh, from his people groups, right? And he now can pass for Zoe, and that is really what was happening in modern Egypt as opposed to the local population.
So it really depends on how you want to pin your perspective.
How you want to fight that fight?
Well, it's not a fight. It's not a fight. It's not a fight. I mean, in my
it's a fight.
Well, okay, all right.
Yeah.
I don't believe
emphatically. I'll tell you what they're saying.
Now, Dr. Shamarka knows that it's not a fight because he has the data on his side. The fight is the people without the data on their side, right? But watch how it's spun.
Emphatically that the populations in the Nile Valley now is not, wouldn't be part of those ancient Egyptians or not those people at all. That those Egyptians that went to Kenya.
So now, that's not exactly what Dr. Shamarka said at all. Dr. Shamarka said that those populations in there are not the same as population because of the influx of Near East Asian Ottoman men, right? And so their signatures are more dominant to the Near East and Asian groups. But Ankh says this. Now Ankh says this, and let's listen to it again.
Nile Valley now is not, wouldn't be part of those ancient Egyptians or not those people at all. That those Egyptians that went to Kenya, South Africa, and that's what and they take their totems with you. I've heard all.
Okay, so that's not exactly what we're really talking about. What we, in that sense, what Ankh is talking about was whether or not the ancient Egyptians migrated, or the later groups of people that were in ancient Egypt, once being attacked by these foreigners, did they migrate out of the region into other places, right? Well, what he didn't bring in is that in the later period, it was slavery, right? So they didn't have a chance to run. They didn't have a chance to run. They were simply trapped into the slavery, Arab slavery. Now, then there's the groups of the Nubian and Sudanic people. Well, they didn't run. It took them 500 years in the Bach Treaty to be Arabized, right? They didn't run, but the people that were indigenous to Egypt, right, through all of those periods, um, when enslavement came, it became really problematic, and so many of those people who were darker, and certainly those who did not convert to Islam, they were enslaved. So they were depopulated by slavery, right? And we know this because of the Bach Treaty, and we know this because they would have went further if not stopped at Dongola, right, by the people who were formerly Cushitic people, right? So they were stopped, and then in the Bach Treaty, there was an agreement for them to give slaves or enslaved people to the Arabs, and then the Arabs complained because that wasn't happening as frequently as they would like, right? And so the Bach Treaty lasted 500 years, and so ultimately uh, um, they were some of those groups converted to Christianity. So you have Dr. Faraji's great work on the Nubian Pharaoh, the last Nubian Pharaoh, where they converted to Christianity so that they could have a more global connection to the Byzantines, who the Arabs were fighting at that time period. But that actually collapsed because the Arabs were able to uh, break that. But the Nubians, King Silko, he converted to Christianity uh, for at that time period, but ultimately the Islamic formula was much more greater, and so they become Arabized. Okay, so Yeruk says, what does he say? When did anybody say Egyptians went to Kenya and South Africa? Uh, there you go. That whole, but I try to triage that by saying uh, he's saying the Afrocentrics say that, but the fact of the matter is he doesn't really understand the dynamics of the enslavement, right? They where they went was to Cairo, and then from Cairo they went through to the Ottoman quarters. Okay, so let's go.
Okay. Now let me ask a question about this.
Ask that question. Go
You
ahead.
have to ask a question. If anybody shares that in that way, you have to ask them, well, why aren't they speaking Egyptian?
Okay, wait.
Where they at? Where they went to?
Okay, let me see that.
Ask that question. Go
You
ahead.
have to ask a question. If anybody shares that in that way, you have to ask them, well, why aren't they speaking Egyptian?
Okay, so I don't know. Dr. Shamaka gave a carrot to Ankh, and so let me just deal with that to my brother, Dr. Shamaka Kite. The fact of the matter is, the ancient Egyptians, as they're called, created language, created writing, right? And they put their language in their writing. The Cushitic people, the later Cushitic people in the 25th dynasty, that's Pianki, Shabaka, uh, Tahaka, and those groups of people, they spoke Egyptian. I hope everybody realizes that. They spoke Egyptian. And when they conquered Egypt, it was what you call the double kingdom. So the double kingdom consisted of Upper and Lower Egypt and Upper and Lower Sudan, right? Now, all the groups that was in the local Upper and Lower Sudan did not speak so-called Egyptian. They did not. They created some of them created their own script, which is the Meroic script, right? So they didn't have to speak. They spoke their own indigenous languages, and they put in the Meroic script. And to this day, the Meroic script has only been partially, how can I say, deciphered, because within that Meroic script is indigenous languages. So, Dr. Shamaka Kite, I understand what you were trying to say, but Egypt was falling in this late period. It wasn't the power that it was. And other groups of people had their own languages. And we know for a fact that the Meroic groups converted, used at first ancient Egyptian language, and then with that, with that, they you also used their own local languages, and they created a script. So if I was on that panel and talked to him, I would have kind of pressed that issue. But I am a fan of Dr. Shamaka Kite. Now, okay, so okay, so now Brother James says this. So let's see what he says. Can't we trace the pastoralism spread south, reaching South Africa almost 2,000 years later? Yes, but cattle was in the region earlier, in that region earlier, right? So cattle was always cattle pastoral. The cattle pastoralism of the Southern African groups, or the groups of Rwanda and Burundi and Ethiopia, they had their own, how can I say, pastoralism, right? So they didn't need ancient Egyptian pastoralism, and those groups of people contributed to early deep time African ancient Egyptian ideas, because the cattle dance is in Egypt and the cattle dance is in Rwanda, right? So there's shared affinities and trade between those groups, and so they could be separate but similar. So with that said, I'm gonna stop and open up the line, and then we can talk. So let me put the link into the show. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to do the Get Back show, because there's a bigger issue in this that I detected. There's a bigger issue in this that I detected, which I'll do in the second show. But this is the first show, and in the next show, I'm really gonna go ham, right? Because we are okay. Here's my point of view. They're only in this whole community, in the whole conscious community. They're probably only, I'm talking about the thousands and all of these platforms that we call the so-called conscious community. There's probably only 10 people that actually write anything. There's thousands that just talk, but there is only about 10 people that can write anything, and then writing anything that's peer reviewed, there's only maybe 3 or 4 people, right? I mean, I can name them on my, what's Yarek saying? Also, they need to address the total population of Egypt in ancient times was 1.8 million. Now it's over 14 million. Clearly, Turks multiplied, not the ancients. Brilliant. Brilliant. Now, how that's that. I like that, because that's what Morpheus does. He is very math inspired in his work. So let's look at what Yarek said. They need to address the total population of Egypt now. right? Which is $14 million. 14 million people, opposed to what Egypt was in the 1.8 million to 2 million, and maybe at one time 3 million. Seem to have some, yeah. I don't know what happened to my chat. Can somebody chat something? Seem to have gotten disconnected. Yeruk, you get the gold medal today. That's some real high level debunking. Oh man, that's matter of fact, man, that's one of the best. Thank you. That's one of the best. So, okay, so let me get rid of this thing, and I'll just bring in a few more things, and I'll wait for people to come in if they want to come in. But there's no fight, that Dr. Shamaka Kite said. Let me stop sharing my screen for a second and bring this up. There's no fight. Okay, so how am I going to do this? Okay, so let's go bring in the Iberomotion. Ibero. See if I can bring that in. Ibero. Oh, shoot. Okay, give me a second, and gonna bring it in a second. I got to move tab. Sorry, open the container. I'm using another browser, so it gives me it gives me some difficulties. So give me a second. Okay, move to another workspace. How do I do this? Okay, move tab. There it goes. Move tab. Move to a new window. Great. And I have that. Okay. Great. Okay. And I'm going to bring it in. So, but Yarak, you get the gold medal for that. How do they explain 14 million new population and that they are okay, and that they are the ancient Egyptians, without bringing in where they said there wasn't a population replacement, but it was population absorption, that those groups of people absorbed that. So let's bring this in. So yeah, I don't know why I'm not getting a lot of views. I can't tell you. It's really frustrating on trying to do this work, and but at least there's a record on my page that I in fact did it. So let's go over here. But again, I don't take. Okay, so now I can't share screen. Reggie can't. Okay, so okay, yeah, screen two. Okay, great. Let's get myself out of this. Okay, somebody's coming in. And let's see who's popping in. Pan African James. Boy, Pan African James, they don't like you.
Well, that's okay. I
They
know it's
don't.
hard. I know it's hard to be wrong for some people. You know what I mean? So it's okay. You know, I've come to realize that I'm a little bit ahead of the curve on the genetic side of understanding this. You know what I mean? So that's just what it is. And I try to simplify it, but I guess I didn't understand that it was more complex than what I thought. Like even if I say that Neanderthals aren't modern humans, I thought that would be simple for people to understand.
No, they're not modern humans. Neanderthals are not modern humans.
Yeah, I know. So that's why I'm confused on people not understanding when I say that. Even if I slip up and just say that Neanderthals aren't humans, that's basically what I'm saying. If you
Well,
understand what
that's
I'm
where
saying.
I draw the line with you because
I
it
know, I
was.
know, I know. What I'm saying is for clarity. If you understand what I'm saying, then you should understand what I'm saying. Because you should understand that only modern humans left out and procreated with archaic non-human. I mean non-Africans.
And when they
So
procreated, what happened?
they reduced their genetics to 2% off in all non-Africans.
So they absorbed
So
2%.
there you see, it's another way of see now it's coming back. But when it left out, we absorbed them all the way down to 2%. We diluted that Neanderthal DNA that was up there that was 100%. We diluted it all the way down to 2%. So much so we thought it was extinct, right?
Right, but you have this thing with the Neanderthal as if they
Because
aren't.
listen, Reggie, that is the only way that you can measure human DNA, which left Africa, coming back in. Do you understand that? They can't do it any other way, Reggie.
Yes,
If
we
it's
can do
human
it.
DNA, no, you can't. Only thing that you can count in human DNA is haplogroup mutation. That's it. You are just, but you cannot count introgression and haplogroup mutation. We got them because if they can't tell us when the introgression comes back in, then we know they just African. Bam! Ain't that beautiful? No matter what it mutate to until the introgression happens, they just humans. They just Africans because Africans is human. You get it? Ain't that cold? So no matter what they tell us in these papers, we can wipe all that out until they start talking about introgression. What are humans? 99.9% humans. They're Africans. That's the source of their home. Am I making this up? The only thing that they can count is what they can see in genetics, which is non-modern human. So that's what they count, Reggie. They count that coming back in because humans is already in Africa.
Okay,
So they can't even say so they can't even divide us from sub-Saharan
can you hear
Africans
me?
because we
Can you hear
humans.
me? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
go ahead.
Okay, so thank you because my mic went out for whatever reason, probably just to let you talk. But okay, so here's the thing. I'm talking about today. I'm talking about ancient Egypt and North Africa,
Mm-hmm,
right? And the Badarians, right?
mm-hmm,
That's what I'm talking about today, right? I'm
right.
not arguing with
Mm-hmm.
Ngozi's points of view. I think that Ngozi's my brother. I like Ngozi. I just say, Ngozi, when you talk to me about this period, you're out of your period when you want to talk about Natufians and you want to talk about all of that other stuff and back migrations.
I agree, Reggie. But listen, this is what they use. This ain't just Ngozi doing this. So when you get right there where that little purple thing is, that's Malta. They use that Malta DNA to measure this back migration, Reggie. Malta is 100% or
Absolutely.
99.9% human at 4,500 BCE. So we don't see it yet. So we waiting. When are
Wait,
they gonna produce?
this group of people, these Ibero-Maurutians, later the ancient Egyptians called them the Meshwesh and the Tichinel. These groups of
Mm-hmm.
people, they in the formative period of ancient Egypt, they're not there, right? They may
No.
because of the Green Sahara, there is some relationship, but they come back later in another period because of the Shawshank and those groups of people. But when Ngozi starts talking about this, where is it? When he starts talking about this is out of the discussion that. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, your mic is going. Either it's just me. Ask people on the chat.
Oh,
If it's just me or I don't know.
no, it's not you. It's something going on. Um, but can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you now. Hold on, I'm gonna mute out. Okay, hold on.
No, it's not you muting out. It's not that. What I'm trying to say is that when he's talking about this, the Iber-Maurutians and the Tafora groups, when he's having this discussion, when we're talking about ancient Egyptians, it's not really in the discussion. He's bringing that in. This is out of the period, out of the discussion, right? And so he continues to bring that on, and I have a really big problem with that. The Natufians, when he brings that in, and Gullah out of the period. Yes, there's some back migrated genes. Yes, they're in this area uh, in the Delta region, but they're not formative in the Nile Valley. It's out of the area. Uh, but again, only maybe 10 people in this whole conscious community can write a paper, right? I mean, Smash Rockwell can write. Uh, who else can write? Um, uh, uh, Jedimon Kekere can write. Asoran Ka can write. Asoran Imhotep, he can write. Uh, Ujao could write to a certain degree, right? And in that group, uh, and Ankh has contributed to a paper, so I'm not gonna not opt him out. He's a contributor, but the issue is being a single author writer. Um, that's where the rubber meets the road. So, and of course, I write and I write very well, right? So, unfortunately, I have to write in law, right? And so my work is always peer reviewed when I write in law because it's about cases. So all of these groups of people that they bring in, the Natufians, Ibermarusians, has nothing to do with our conversation whatsoever, right? What the problem is these terms that we're talking about, which is Northeast Africa. So Northeast Africa goes all the way down to the Horn of Africa. All of this is Northeast Africa. You see this right here? All of this is from here all the way down is Northeast Africa. Then they throw in this term called sub-Saharan. They don't like to say that Ethiopia is sub-Saharan. They like to say these groups of people right here, this Rwanda, groups of people right here, the Rift Valley, right? The issue is all the way up here in the Nile Valley, Nubia and the Sudan, all of a sudden they make them sub-Saharan African. And that is the problem. So you can turn back on your mic and I'll put the link back on if anybody else wants to come on. Otherwise, I think I've helped, and I think that wow, some of you, I think that some of you I think that some of you have understood that we have to keep the foot on the neck. We're not outsiders to science. We read it very well, right? We're not outsiders to Egyptology. We agree with Dr. Sharma Kakite, right? We agree with a lot of Egyptologists, and then some we disagree with some of their points, right? Um, but this paper helps us, this map helps us in saying that a lot of these conversations that they're having are just diversion conversations because they don't know a lot about Egypt at all. No. So over here, so in an article entitled Pleistocene North Africa Genomes Link Near Eastern and Sub-Saharan African Populations. Mark van der Loostreck, 2018, did a full genome-wide analysis of Y-DNA from 7 ancient individuals from the Talfora site that Ngozi brings up. The fossils were directly dated to between 15,000 to 13,000 calibrated years, Green Sahara. All males.
I'm back, Reggie, just in case.
Then you can. So great. All males of the Talfora belong to the haplogroup E1B1A1 M78. This haplogroup occurs most frequently in present-day North and East African populations. Right? The closely related E1B1 1B M-123 haplogroups have been reported to the epipaleolithic Natufians and pre-pottery Neolithic Levantines. So this group of people, they also find themselves here. Lucha say present-day North Africans share a majority of their ancestry with present-day Near Easterns, but not with Sub-Saharan Africans.
Can you stop right there, Reggie?
Yeah.
Now, hold on. I must have did something wrong. Hold on. Oh, hold on. I'll be right back. Dang.
Oh, tall guy, Haru, you missed a great show. You can come back. How you doing, good brother? But you're Mr. Great. You're Mr. Great show, right? But what I'm doing right now is I'm reading that this point. Luster Direct states present-day North Africans share majority of their ancestry with present-day Near Easterners, but not with Sub-Saharan Africans. Although the predominant Y-DNA of the Maghreb is EM81, maternally 6 individuals of the Talfort remains bore the U6A haplogroup, and 1 individual was of the M1B haplogroup. These Eurasian haplogroups proposed as markers for the autochthonous Maghreb ancestries, which may have been originally introduced in the region by a back to Africa migration from West Asia, right? A two-way admission scenario using the Tufian and modern Sub-Saharan, including West Africans and the Tanzanian Hasda, as reference populations, inferred that the 7 Talfort individuals are best modeled genetically as 63.5 West European related to the 36.5 Sub-Saharan ancestry, with the latter being both West African-like and Hasda-like affinities. The reason why I'm using this, I'm talking about this, is because this North African population over here, right? These groups of people, they're not directly at all related to the ancient Egyptian populations, right? And they are largely this belt up here, right? And they do migrate down because of the Green Sahara, but largely the Nile Valley populations, you find them in Nubia, Sudan, and the Horn of Africa, intermixed with those same populations that were up in what you call Lower Egypt, right? And so they like to play this game of Northeast Africa, but Northeast Africa is the Horn of Africa all the way up here to about Libya, right? Right? They like to play that game. But then they play this other game where they start talking about Sub-Saharan Africa, but Sub-Saharan Africa now is Nubia, Aswan, Nubia, and beyond, right? But then they don't call Ethiopia Sub-Saharan Africa. So those are the games, and in my next show, I'm going to bust that wide open. And then when you have people who say read they can't understand what I'm saying. Okay, Northeast Africa is all of this region right here, including the Horn of Africa. But Sub-Saharan Africa, they stop it over here with Nubia, right? And below. They don't want to say that that's Northeast Africa. But when you get to Ethiopia, that's Northeast Africa. Back again. So it's a racial view, right? Rather than these labels are not scientific at all.
I agree.
And so now you got to catch them. But then you got to stop Ngozi. You got to stop Gullah. You got to stop all of those groups of people talking about Egypt, because the Abarusians and the Tufians, they, if anything, they're in the Delta region. They're not in the heart of, they have no connection to the Bedouin groups, very little to the Bedouin groups, and very little to the Nubian groups, and very little to the Sudanic groups. So with that, okay, so are modern North Africans related to the Tufians? Yes, 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 they are. And the Ibero-Mauritanians, yes. But in Egypt, it's only was in the Delta. And so we know this because we can look at comparison between burial sites. We can look at the comparison between houses. We can look at the skeletal remains. We can look at linguistics, right? But these groups of people are not that related to, okay, they're not related to the Bedouin groups, which is the formative group that Dr. Shamarka Keita and others use as the early ancient Egyptians. Now, Talk Heru says, because last I heard, ancient Natufians didn't have any Neanderthal admixture. Those groups of people did not. They had minuscule, but
and see that what he's pointing out right there, Reggie, is that means that they was Africans.
No, they're not Africans. They're out of Africa. No, they're out of.
Okay. Okay. There's some kind of way the mic cut off again. That's this streaming. This is the same streaming that Wavy be using. Yeah. This is the Jinky streaming service, Reggie. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. This is what I can afford.
I'm just saying this like you keep cutting out. I can't hear what you saying. Like when you be talking, it'll cut out. I wonder if everybody else can they hear Reggie. Oh, so he said he hear Reg. He hear you well, Reg. I hear you well. So maybe it's just my damn computer.
Yeah, this is what I can afford, right?
Me too. I mean, I need to get another computer if I can't hear what you're saying. So we in the same boat, Reggie. I'm just saying see, this is the whole trick of everything. And I swear it's dealing with precise measurements in mathematics. I mean, in genetics, Reggie. And what I keep trying to hone in and get people to understand is the 99.9%.
I understand, but what I'm talking about, I'm really talking about the formative DNA genome of the ancient Egyptians being the Bedouins and connected to the Nubian and Sudanic and Ethiopian populations. And
okay, so what I'm saying, Reggie, is it does anything that they say about any type of haplogroup mutation, it don't matter. No matter what they say. The phenotypical differences in humans are only based on environmental pressures. They can't see that. Just like that's why you can have the same haplogroup and be an Arab. So we looking for what makes someone non-African, because that's what they're trying to push into Africa to say that they was there. They know it. But y'all don't get the game yet. And I'm trying to help.
No, you are, but
because Everybody that's 99.9%, and I can show you right now, Reggie, but I
I
don't think it's gonna work
understand,
on
but
this thing.
what in this particular program, right? My program is really narrow, right? It's really narrow because I'm really talking about Bedarians and ancient Egyptians, and that doesn't apply. Uh, the Neanderthal and all that stuff does not really apply, but what applies is haplogroups, that these haplogroups of these people and these haplogroups of these people and these haplogroups of these people, when they come into North Africa, Northeast Africa, they're absorbed, but these populations down here, the Sudan and Nubia populations, these are other people, right? These are other, they have other signatures. But genome doesn't tell you, that's not your brain. Those are things within your body, right? That's not your brain. What made ancient Egypt so-called, is its culture, its ideas of kingship and burial, and to produce writing and to produce a civilization, right? That is where I am at. Sometimes we mix up, we how can I say, we mix up time periods, and I'm saying keep your foot on Gullah and Ngozi, because they make this point of whatever these groups are and whatever these groups, that they are important to ancient Egypt, and they are not. They're not. They're simply just not.
Not culturally, they're definitely not. Because
Not genome based.
the culture isn't even there yet.
And not
At
genome
the time
based.
that they're talking. Well, that's
Well,
where
nothing.
that's what they're trying to do, though, Reggie. I'm just trying to let you know that's what they're
Exactly.
trying to do.
That's why I'm saying.
But the way that you defeat them from a genetic standpoint is they have to prove that DNA carries what they would see. It's Europeans that's doing.
I don't care what they carry. I care that the culture, the socialization, the religious concepts, all of those things that made ancient Egypt, right, is not in these places. I don't care about.
But yeah, you can just use the culture. I definitely agree with that. We already know from that standpoint it's over. But what the problem is, Reggie, you having a conversation with people that's using genetics. They're not even using culture, are they? Are the people is that what they talking about?
No,
or am I missing?
They're not in, but I don't need to use, I can use genetics to say that the Bedarian groups of people are the base population, and they climb closer to the Nilotic cultures, right? And so I can use that. There you go.
You talking about culturally, right?
No, I said climb, right? Genetically climb with the Nubian and the Sudanic populations and the Ethiopian populations. They are more related to those populations than they are related to the populations of the Ibero-Maurusians and the early Natufians, right?
Right, and that would be based on time span, like being closer to the
5,000
beginning of the.
5,000.
You got Mota in the Ethiopian highlands at 4,500, Reggie. He's not relevant to the conversation.
Yeah, he's because his gene, because these groups of people went down the Nile. These groups of people went down the Nile, right? These groups of people are not relevant genetically to the Bedarian groups of people.
I could agree with that.
And so DNA is just one lens. Culture, anthropology, and stuff is another lens. And I
they don't like all that. We put all that together, it's over.
Yeah. So we need to at some point there needs to be a conference, another UNESCO conference on what is the relationships between Egypt, ancient Egypt, and Northeast Africa. Let's get rid of the sub-Saharan BS. So with that said, it's 12:01.
Yeah.
I'm going to end. Y'all should replay this show, and I'm giving you some tools to clap back at the three the hard way, Gullah, Ankh, and Ngozi, and um, the Community of Skeptics, right? And to challenge them if they even really understood what Dr. Shamaka Kita said, because once Ankh did that whole going to taking their totems to Kenya and all of that other stuff, that was completely out of the that was nobody was talking about that. What is Yarok say? The reason why the Neanderthal admixture is important is because all non-Africans carry it today. So if the Natufians didn't have it, so they would be African in comparison to the non-African admixture. And yes, right. They
Yeah,
would be
that's my
more
point.
closely related. They would be more closely related to the African populations, but they're out of Africa. Now, there's the Anatolian farmer and these groups of people over here that Asar and Ka was talking about. These groups of people, right? Uh, these groups of people, they find themselves in these regions too, right? The West Eurasian groups of people. They find themselves intersecting later with the Natufian groups of people and those people on the continent of Africa, right? So they contribute genes, but genes is not, when you're talking about ancient Egypt, right? These genes have really very little to do with ancient Egypt except for what they call Lower Egypt, right? But the heart of it is in Badarian and Akkad, right? So those are so they're bringing in stuff to confuse people, and it's not really not relevant to the conversation. But your work and what Yarok is saying, fine, go deal with Ngozi, but please stay in chronology. Like, we don't care about the Natufians. They care about the Natufians. We don't care about the Ibero-Maurusians, right? When it comes to ancient Egypt, they care about it. We don't care about the West Eurasian. They care about it. We care about that. You see this map? This is what you call Northeast Africa. This little BS right here, right? What about the rest of Africa? Why is that marginalized? They're trying to make us think that this shit right here is important and everybody else is sub-Saharan, like, and they're making it like these groups of people are monkeys on trees, non-human, as opposed to these groups over here. Well, I think I said enough. It's 12:05. I appreciate y'all coming on my show, but please go through my show, and I'm telling you how to clap back at these guys. Please, everybody, put in your final comments. James, since you're on, what's your final comment? What's going on? What you think? And everybody else, put in your final comments in the chat. Hello? Okay. So put in your final comments. Just type that in. Thanks, Tolga Heru. Thank you so much. Any other final comments? And please like the video. Please like the video. Come on, man. I don't understand why my work, why I don't get views and all this craziness gets views. I don't know. Thanks, Yarok. Please like the video. Everybody like the video so at least I can get some traction. It's not enough people to give me a cash app, but you can buy me coffee. It's gone from lunch to coffee now. That's how bad it is in these YouTube streets. But people are on these other shows, and these other shows, please, these people don't even, some of these people don't even have goddamn GEDs, and they're your favorite YouTubers, YouTube channels. They ain't got high school. They're your favorite YouTube channels. They got no college, but they're your favorite YouTube channels. And then the people who actually go to museums, talk about the language, have some of the greatest teachers, we're marginalized. Rakim, peace to you, my good brother. How you doing, man? How's Lee? How's everybody? Right? When you coming to New York, man, and walk the new Metropolitan Museum on West Africa, African arts, right? That's right, Tolga Heru. Yeah, it's summertime. I know you coming to New York for the African Arts Festival. So if you do, and coming to, I guess I think one of your daughters or something is in New York or something around here. Come and holler at me. So with that said, Rakim, like the video, and when you get a chance, come back and watch the video. But I really think that I really did a great show and bust some backs, bust some heads. Yeah. So with that said, I'm gonna have to get hydrated. So I'm gonna say good night to everybody. Oh, Toga Heru. Okay. Toga Heru, you sending it on Gmail or you sending it on Hotmail? Let me put in my Hotmail because everything's happening to me, y'all. Things are going into spam. They're really attacking Brother Reggie. So with that said, I am going to say good night. Please put your chats in. Thanks everybody for contributing. Thank you, Pan African James, for actually coming on and lending your voice. Appreciate that. I am going to close out. Thank you. So where we at with this? Yeah. I'm going to put on some music to read some of your chats on the way out. Where is the music? That's the music. And Pan African James is beating up on my streaming service. I cannot believe that. Yeah. Let's go. you.